Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2019 show. I'm your host, Don Kay. We are live from McGilvery Speedway at 30th and High School in the beautiful town of Speedway, Indiana. Tonight's show is presented, as always, by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, NTT IndyCar Series, and SVRA. Couple things to mention. First off, I have to extend our condolences to Bill Throckmorton and his mother on the loss of his stepfather. The viewing is tomorrow at Conkle's at Speedway from 11 to 1, and then the funeral service will follow. Sorry to hear about that, and didn't know about it until last Tuesday night, and he passed away Monday. One of the guys that does the television setup and is sometimes here when he's not doing something else, Brian Pierce, has a birthday. I believe it's tomorrow. So I want to thank Brian for what he does and for being around here. And also, although he's not here tonight, which is rather odd, but Eldon Rasmussen, I think Sunday, celebrated his 61st or 62nd anniversary of his 21st birthday. I'm not sure which one it is, but he isn't here to defend himself. And I also want to remind you, if you need a dentist, I mean, everybody can't wait to go to the dentist's office, but if you need a dentist, the place to go is the Indy Dental Group. Dr. Jack Miller and Dr. Liz Lewis has a phenomenal practice. Their people are spectacular. Need an appointment, give them a call. Number 317-846-6125. And on August 23rd and 24th, the cars at the Vintage Indy Registry will return to WTT Raceway at Gateway in Madison, Illinois for the second annual edition of Open Wheel Icons. The Vintage Indy cars will share the oval with the NTT Data IndyCar Series over the Bommarito 500 weekend. Over 25 legendary cars are expected in the fan-friendly Speedway Motors Museum of American Speed Vintage Indy Paddock. Early entries include the number 672 AAR Olsenite Eagle of Bobby Unser, the number 56 1979 Genesee Beer Wagon of Penske P7, and the number 183 A.J. Foyt Calumet's Farm March Cosworth. Several former 500 drivers are expected to be in attendance and behind the wheel of the historic machines. Last year saw Indy 500 starter, five-time Indy 500 starter John Martin and Springfield, Illinois' Donnie Beecher turn laps at Gateway. The cars will be featured throughout both days with multiple track sessions. The Vintage Indy Paddock is free and open to all ticketed fans. If you need tickets, go to www.www.wwtraceway.com. Get tickets, and the show they put on and the cars they have is spectacular. Now, my first guest is a gentleman that I have not had on for some time because he's busy. He is the senior vice president of Don Schumacher Racing, and he is without doubt a full-fledged DNA race nut. But just recently, he was welcomed and inducted into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Now that says some, a Hall of Famer. And I think the guy that introduced you was some kid that used to start off fumbling around by the name of Don Garlits.
Yeah, Big Daddy, I think we finished that evening, and I told him that his legacy will go far beyond being the first to go 200 and the first to go 250 and the first to win NHRA championships. But the fact that he started a drag racing Hall of Fame and did it well and does it, that was, I think, the 29th induction ceremonies. It's a pretty amazing feat for one individual within our community to make that commitment. NHRA didn't do it. NHRA has its own awards programs, and NHRA participates and recognizes what Don does. But at least our sport has a Hall of Fame, and boy, it sure felt good to be inducted.
And it should. You've been around a long, long time. But you've been in a number of positions. When I first got here about 29 years ago, you were the general manager at IRP.
Yep.
Somewhere after that, you became, I think, president of Professional Racing Organization that worked with the teams and drivers and NHRA to make it safer and better and faster.
Sure.
And then somehow you ended up at Don Schumacher Racing. How did you get to Don Schumacher?
Ironically, and it's a true story, the day that I left IRP, and it wasn't choice. I mean, most of you know it was a downsize, a corporate downsize, and I was one of 19 people released on a day in June in, what was that, 98, I think. That evening, I was at dinner downtown with some friends, and my phone rang, and it was Don Schumacher that same day. And he told me that he was starting a drag racing team, and would I be interested? And I had no idea that he wanted to do more than just put a car together for his son, Tony, to race. So to make a career commitment from NHRA and Maple Grove Raceway before that, to work for just a one-car team, I didn't say yes right away. I mean, we consulted. I did some work with him. Got to know. I know Tony from here. Tony had been here a number of times, and that's probably where Don got my phone number. So we had been good friends, and I worked on a consulting basis, doing some public relations and some of his marketing and some sponsor presentations. And we were successful on growing DSR, but I had no idea how ambitious Don Schumacher was at heart until I watched him put a second team together for Whit Bazemore, and then a third team for Scotty Cannon, a fourth team for Gary Selzy. And when he asked, he said, "I really need you full time," in 2002, and I said, "Yeah, let's do it." My daughter had already been working there since 2000, so it's been an amazing ride. I told him that day, the next 15 years of my life are going to fly, and they absolutely have. They've been wonderful, challenging, but I mean, it's just the best opportunity I could have asked for. I'm very grateful to Don and his family. And today we've got 125 people at DSR, and they're my family.
You started, speaking of your family, at Maple Grove. I think your family owned the track, and you started out cleaning the facilities and worked your way up from there. Is that what got you hooked in racing?
Well,
at an
I
early
had
age?
an uncle and a cousin that raced at the Reading Fairgrounds, half-mile dirt track, a lot like Terre Haute, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait for the day that I could go stock car racing. And when we built Maple Grove, I heard my first nitro car, and my interest in racing was redirected to drag racing. And it was just something about the sound of a nitro engine that to this day just perks my ears up. There's not much left inside there, but I fell in love with nitro racing and still love it to this day.
You know, there's something about racing that, as you and I were talking, I should have packed it in a long time ago, but I love it. We get to talk to people like you and my next guest coming in and all the people that have come through here in the last 30 years that I've been in Indianapolis. I enjoy it, but there's something about racing. When it gets you, it gets a hold of you and won't let go.
No, it really doesn't. And part of it, and you mentioned friends like this. I mean, most of the faces in here are familiar faces. So it's an honor to be here. It's great to come back and see so many old friends. But everywhere we go around the country, we just came from Epping, New Hampshire. My old buddy Al Segrini, Arnie Karp. I mean, these are people that we raced with in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And we'll go next to Denver, and there's a whole group of people in Denver. Johnny Abbott's gone, but his family is still there. Then we go to Northern California, and Jeep and Ronnie Hampshire were two. I mean, they would have been great in Indy cars, except they were California kids, and they got hooked on Top Fuel racing. But they're going to be waiting for us out there. And there's just so many friends. And part of, I guess, what I fear most about retiring is losing contact with a lot of old friends. That's what makes it fun to go to the races. There's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of responsibility involved. There's a lot of disappointment when your teams don't win. We're tired of watching Steve Torrance win, but God bless him. They've earned every one of them. It's all about the people of racing. And Vicky's been with me now for 10 years. We've been married almost 10 years. My friends are her friends. Nobody makes a friend like she does. So that makes it easy for us to travel together. We'll go somewhere off the beaten path like Bakersfield, California. And if I'm there alone, people want to know where's Vicky. So it's cool for us. It's cool to be adopted into a family that isn't just drag racing. I mean, I love going to Putnamville. Geez, I took my grandson out there last year. He can't wait to go back. Travis Berryhill worked for us at the time, now works for John Force. But we love, I mean, there's nothing like going to an oval track race and being a fan of somebody, of everybody, but of somebody especially. So Travis gave us that opportunity to go out there and cheer for him. And my grandson didn't want to leave till the Bombers were done. So someday he'll be a race fan. And I guess that's one thing I'd encourage everyone, you know, as generations move on, as we age, take time to take your kids and your grandkids to the races.
It's
I don't care if it's
happens.
drag racing or oval racing or obviously the big races here at the Speedway. Get your kids involved.
Absolutely. Well, I started following drag racing when Chris Karamesini was a kid. And he's still running. And
He's still driving. We have his car in the shop.
Yeah.
They did something really interesting with his car. At Norwalk, Ohio, Jim Head said, Greek, I'm going to put my motor in your car, and you're going to go real fast. Well, and he did. Funny car injector and all. It looked altogether different than the engines in the top fuel cars. And you learn very quickly that even the most experienced racers in the sport, it's not as easy as you think to take this motor and put it in this car and expect it to perform. There were little things like forgetting to turn the air bottle on, so the clutch management system didn't come into effect on the first run, and they couldn't shut the engine down. So he made a 5-second run, full throttle. God bless him. But they finally got the car to perform a little bit, and he finally said, let me go back to my own stuff. So his car's in our shop. Todd and Scott Okahara are going through everything front to back. Joe Barlam's in the back. He was part of that rebuild for the Greek a couple of times, and the car always ran 390s. But, I mean, it's amazing. We learned a lot of amazing things about the Greek.
Yeah.
He was in the Army, and in the late 1940s, he was shot, and he was captured. And when he was released from captivity, he was in charge, and I'm going to try to get this story straight, but about 1948, he was in charge of some of the German captives that we still held. And one of those injured him beyond the shooting enough that he was discharged from the Army for medical reasons. And suddenly looking for something else to do in life. And boy, did he find it. But geez, there's a man who, his history in drag racing started at the end of World War II. And he's still driving top fuel cars. His daughter now owns, and lives most of the time here at Indy, she owns an A-fuel dragster. Krista Baldwin is her name. And she's working her way up. She is now the car owner and driver. And someday will probably take Grandpa's seat. But, I mean, it's just one of the many great family stories in drag racing.
And when he goes to take her out, he'll get out kicking.
Yeah, yeah.
He's 80-something, I think.
Yeah, he's 80-something.
Yeah,
and not 81 or 82. He's a little further along. And he always kids me about driving his car. I'm a big fan of Chris Karamesini's. Vicky's a little afraid that I will.
And if he offered it, you'd jump in it, wouldn't you?
I'd think about it.
Yeah, there you go. I also, one of the big ones back in the day when I started following was the Hemi Under Glass. And I forget Don, somebody or another, I can't remember his name. But there was a bunch of them I used to go to, the drags that I forget where the heck the tracks were. Rockford, Illinois, I think had
Rockford,
one.
Illinois.
Yeah, I used to go up there and watch. You know, it's amazing that the sport, in my opinion, the spectator attendance changed dramatically when they put that camera up behind the cars. Because when you're sitting in the grandstand and they go like that, you don't see them steering. You don't see them driving the car. But when you get to behind and watch them, then you can see they're actually driving the car. And it sounds silly. You're only going 1,000 feet. Oh, yeah? I'd hate like hell to hit the wall at 300 miles an hour, which occasionally happens. But there's a lot involved in that.
There is, and it happens so quick. And you, I mean, we can tell just watching not just our drivers, but all the drivers, those that have the natural born instinct. And not everybody who is successful, I'm not going to pick on Kenny Bernstein, but Kenny was not a natural driver at first, but he did it enough, and he just became one of the best drivers in the history of the sport. And that was kind of that instinct that you learn from and Joe knows Kenny as well as anyone, from being a perfectionist, from critiquing yourself, everything you do, every minute of every day. He became the best drag racer of his time and one of the best in history. And then there's others that just get in the car for the first time. And as a crew chief, Joe really would know this more quickly than I would. Being able to just feel the car go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 0.8 of a second. And if something leans the car in one direction or the other, feeling it, making a small correction early, allows the car to stay in the middle of the track and make a good, successful run. And a lot of people wait a little bit, or they're a little timid with their steering, and by that time, the car's out of the groove. And if you move to the right and the right tire's out of the groove, the left tire is going to push you even further to the right. So the balance is completely gone, and your chance of finishing that run are 1 in 100. So that's what separates a natural driver. Actually, not everybody is a natural driver, but those that make it are the ones that have the natural ability and the determination and are willing to get back up after they make mistakes. And everybody crosses the center line at some point. Not everybody hits the wall. There's a little more of a tendency to go to the middle where there's only those little orange cones than big chunks of concrete. But you can tell pretty quickly who's and how quickly a new driver gets in front of the car by how accurately they are, where they shut the engine off, pull the parachutes. And in this day and age, it's not just a matter of listening to it. There's timers on the cars. And, I mean, Joe could talk to his drivers. He's got some new drivers over at Vandergriff, and he'll tell them if they shut off at 1,001 feet. And if they didn't, why they better next time.
You know, speaking of Kenny Bernstein, I had him. We did a special one night at Hooters on 38th Street, and I invited him, and he came. And he was there early and signed autographs and all of that. He left, shook hands. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation, which of course the people lined up wanted to invite him. He came there for some reason. About 3 days later, I get a handwritten letter from him, thanking me, signed, and I appreciate it. If I can ever do it again, don't hesitate to call. Well, of course, I've hesitated because I figured I got lucky once. Don't push. How is the health of NHRA?
NHRA has ups and downs like everybody. I mean, we're going through a new generation of motorsports fans. I mean, think of the world the first time I came here. I mean, just think of what's transpired in our world since then. Geez, I don't care how you watch TV, whether it's cable or Hulu or whatever, you've got hundreds of channels to watch. So identifying an NHRA fan by their choice to watch us on TV is pretty amazing. People have just as many options on what to do with their free time, or nothing at all. I mean, and we're all slaves to our phones. Yeah. What did that T-shirt say? We've never been to Vermont. So yesterday, Vicki and I went to Vermont, a little town called Brattleboro, and there was a T-shirt in the window that said, help me out, the weaker the Wi-Fi, the stronger the connection. But we have to compete for fans in this era.
Oh, yeah, no question.
So people don't have the attention span they used to. They don't want to come to the drag races at 7 a.m. Knowing that we're not going to finish till 6 or 7 at night. So we try to do everything in a shorter amount of time, add entertainment with music and other functions. We had pretty close to sellout Saturday and Sunday at Epping, but it's a small track, small seating capacity. I think where we all have a little bit more difficulty filling the seats is when you go to a stadium with 50,000 seats and you put 20 or 30,000 people that know that they can wait till they see the 5-day weather forecast, and maybe if the weather looks good, they'll walk up and buy a ticket. In the old days and at the smaller tracks, and our track at Maple Grove is, we only have probably 26,000 seats. We generally can sell all of them. So people will still buy in advance. If we put 30 or 35 or 40 and you get beyond the supply and demand quotient, people will have the opportunity to wait till the last minute, which isn't good for business.
Is getting sponsored. Now, let me back up a second. I just got a copy, thanks to Bill Throckmorton, of the latest issue of Speed Sport. And then there was a bunch of articles. One was on Tony. I spotted it and went, I want to. And it was kind of funny. He has said, we're not running because Army pulled out. And my dad's not going to sponsor, which is a smart move. Get a sponsor. He's got, 87 wins and 8 championships or something. So somebody will step up and say, we ought to get with this guy. But he said, funny as it is, in an entire season, we only race about 6 minutes. So when you think about it, actual racing, 6 minutes.
The time that he's at full throttle, you add it all up, and it's about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
The amount of time that he spends working on the car and flying to and from the track, and especially in the Army days where he did 200 Army talks every year, that's where he earned his sponsorship. The 6 minutes is pretty crazy when you think about it, but that's probably about accurate.
I noticed this weekend there was 13 top fuel cars.
Correct.
Somebody that's a fan said, probably the reason they're not going is they're going to hold off because Vermont or New Hampshire wasn't a great place to go necessarily, and they'll wait until the Nationals. And when the point thing starts, if you can't make the point, if you're a racer, go.
There's a lot of people that want to race top fuel. We had a couple of people at the shop today that wanted to upgrade their program to a DSR car. We had a request 2 weeks ago from a really good sportsman racer for a turnkey top fuel car. What would it cost? Would you help? And of course we will. We were fortunate that we had enough parts. When Paul Lee called us, he wanted a turnkey funny car. So we leased him a little shop space, and he and Jim Oberhofer and Donnie Bender and a group of people basically moved to Indy, bought a truck and trailer and everything from us. And Ron Tobler rolled the Napa car right next to where they were working and said, this is what you want to build. And worked with them every step of the way. Paul had the funding, not to run 24 races, but to build a good, solid foundation. And Paul's a great driver, went through some health issues and recovered, and said, this is what I want to do. So he put the funding together first and realizes now that he can't run more than 8 or 10 races and run them competitively, meaning going to the track and making all 4 qualifying runs, learning everything there is to learn about both lanes, giving the crew as much experience as possible, and giving himself as much seat time as possible. So unlike a lot of racers that run part-time, they're happy to qualify, Paul wants to win. So we were able to put a car together that's DSR equipment from front to back. He owns it, pays for it. His team services the car between rounds. They tune the car. And, they were not afraid to ask questions. And our crew chiefs, especially Ron Tobler, was very quick to give them advice on how to get off on the right foot. So his cars run 392. He was number 3 qualifier at Norwalk. So in the future, we look forward to helping the smaller teams. And Todd Okahara especially has been very helpful to a lot of the teams. You can have the money and build a top fuel car. Buy everything and start bolting it together, figuring out where all the telemetry goes and all the... I couldn't do that.
I couldn't either.
But I've watched the teams do it. The problem, though, is that when you step on the gas, if it's not done perfectly, the cost of a mistake could be 50 grand.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going to try to make qualifying money and maybe a little round money and a little sponsorship money so you can get to the next race, and a catastrophic failure and you're done. So it's in our best interest to help teams that ask for help and to help them at least make decent runs from the starting line to the finish line. And there's some teams that are doing a pretty good job of it. Audrey Worm was the driver who came by today, and I know she's talked with some of the other teams and has the prospect for some funding to upgrade her program. But they had made a lot of runs at 4 flat, finally made a 3-second run. But they could make those runs at that pace. They would force the driver in the other lane, oftentimes one of our cars, to make a good run, where they were going to be right there and they could beat us. So they knew they couldn't run 380 or 370, and they couldn't run 330. With the equipment they had, they ran the best they could. They learned how to do it consistently, and now they'll start improving a few hundredths at a time.
It's amazing when you think about it. You say a few hundredths. What is that? About this much. I mean, you see these guys win races, and they say a half a car. Like, no, it didn't. It wasn't anywhere. It was less than that. The racing is phenomenal, but you know, when you think about it, you get 11,000 horsepower car going 1,000 feet, and the downforce it takes for a top fuel and for a funny car, I suppose, is probably 8,000 or 10,000 pounds downforce holding the car down, and so many things can go wrong. I mean, you notice if you go out, the pit area is a garage area. You can watch them work on the cars. I always noticed, and I was kind of interested, when they're working on the gears, they kind of hide it, so nobody knows exactly what you're putting in or what they're putting in the car, and everybody's got their own way of doing things, I guess. But I wonder, you know, in an Indy car, for instance, they can set up a car. One driver can go out and say, God, this is great. The other guy gets in and said, you got to be kidding. I can't drive this thing for anything. Is drag racing that way?
To some extent. I mean, pedal location, I mean, people, Matt Hagan and Ron Capps both drive DSR funny cars, and they're about as opposite physically as two human beings could be, and yet they could drive each other's cars by taking the seat out. And if Matt moves his seat to Ron's car, he can squeeze in there. They'll have to take out all the ballast that's in Ron's car. I mean, but there's a way to do all of that. But it's pedal adjustment. And a really good crew chief can look at a driver, and in the limited driving that I've done, I've gotten in some cars where I'm way too big, and my legs are too bent, and you pull the handbrake back, and your elbow runs out of room before you get enough brake pressure to really firmly hold the car. All those little things need to be adjusted. The advantage that our drivers have is they do it 8 or 9 months of the year. They do it for crew chiefs and crew members that are as fussy as they should be, and if they miss something, they won't miss it for long. Tony's reaction times weren't as good as a few other drivers last year, and Mike Neff took a look at his leg position, and it was maybe a little too stretched. So they moved the pedal a little bit, and Tony's reaction times came down. And there's other changes you could make on the way the engine itself functions. The faster the engine gets to full RPM, the quicker the car leaves the starting line. So things like that have changed. The old days, you'd move the throttle 2 or 3 inches, and you had a lot of room to kind of pedal the car. Not anymore. It's about 1 inch. It's either pretty much full throttle or off. Some of the better drivers can still feather it. But those are the kind of things that can help a driver be more successful. But the biggest thing that helps a driver is confidence in the people around you.
Right.
When you're in the car, and I've never driven an Indy car. Well, I did drive that motorcycle-powered car that Jeff Sinden put together.
Yeah.
And it only went 100 miles an hour. I was a little disappointed. I wanted to ride around the speedway. I didn't want to just cruise. But I don't know. It's all different.
It's very interesting, to me, the sport and what it takes. You go in and I watch as much of the NHRA on television as I can. And, you know, I take my car to a service station. They say, well, we got to change the plugs and we're going to do this. And and it's 2 days. You got 90 minutes to tear an engine apart and put it back together, fire it up and go.
If your car was built to change spark plugs every week, there'd be a lot more room under the hood. I mean, you think back to your 57 Chevys and, you know, back in those days. But, I mean, the cars are built so well today that, I mean, they talk about changing your oil once a year and things of that nature. I mean, who would imagine doing that, you know, in the 50s or 60s or 70s? Back to the point that we were just making, the confidence factor, it's hard to define the driver-crew chief relationship in any motorsport. In IndyCar and NASCAR, somebody in a pit box is talking, and obviously somebody on top of the grandstands is talking to the driver, coaching the driver, giving the driver not just information, but confidence. In our world, the confidence that I'm thinking of in my limited experience, when you have a car that performs well and a crew chief that you trust, and you start the engine, the world just comes to life. And when you're about to stage and make the run, and the last face that you see is your crew chief, and you have confidence, I can tell you under my helmet there would be a smile from ear to ear saying, thank you, God, I get to do this. And that's what helps. I mean, that's what's making Steve Torrance successful right now as a driver. His car is the best car out there. Bobby Lagana and Richard Hogan give him that confidence. They're not like football coaches giving him a pep talk. It's just a quiet confidence that he trusts them. He's about to go 330 miles an hour, and he looks up and he sees that face right before he leaves the starting line. And the focus that a driver has at that point is just hard to define. Totally hard to define. And I'm sure it's no different in other sports, but in our sport, with all that racket around you and 11,000 horsepower and the fact that you're going to suddenly take on 4, 5, 6 Gs, you just have confidence.
It's an amazing sport. I enjoy it. I think, and one of the guys that's on your team is probably one of the best, fan-friendly, easiest guy to talk to is Antron Brown.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
What a super guy he is. And he was here not that long ago. His kids have been growing, he's coaching and all that, but I think he's away from that a little bit now, so I can get him every once in a while.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about Antron. Antron has never, in all the years that I've known him, which go back into the middle 90s, I watched him license at IRP with Dave Schultz. Yeah. I've never seen him have a bad minute. Not a bad, I mean, we have good days and bad days, not a bad minute.
Right.
I mean, he's as friendly and down to earth and one of my favorite people on the planet.
Just a super good guy, and to make the transition from 2 wheels to 4, and done so well he did on the motorcycles. He gets into a vehicle that's got probably 100 times the horsepower his motorcycle did, and he went right in. I'm not sure if the first year he won. I think he did.
He did, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people don't know this, but when he was riding the Army motorcycle, he already had a fire suit in his closet. He already had his eyes on Top Fuel and Funny Car, and it was Lee Beard who gave him the opportunity to drive the David Powers car, and that became Matt Coe went with him, and that was his ride, and then Mike Ashley bought the team from David Powers, and Don bought it from Mike Ashley, which is how Antron ended up back with DSR.
Amazing how things happen.
It is.
And Don, you tell me his health is good? He's taking good care of himself?
Don's in great health, and he still lives life at a pace that I can't keep up with. He's in his 70s now and fishing off the coast of Costa Rica for blue marlin this week. And when I started working at DSR, he was still in his office every day in Mount Prospect. Yeah. And he would always joke, we only work half days here. His half day was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. So more often than not, when we were over at the old Chip Ganassi building, I'd be in there from 8 o'clock till 8 o'clock. Just because I knew he wanted stuff done before I left for the day. he's gotten very good at taking some personal time, but he can manage his business on his phone. When I get a question or any of the crew chiefs get a question, Joe knows what I'm talking about. If their car performs really good and wins on Sunday, there may be an attaboy. More often than not, there's questions, what went wrong? Why'd you do this? How are we going to fix this? And so forth. He's in charge. He's in command. But if we need budget for something, we'll put a whole program together and send it to him on generally email, sometimes just a text, and he'll answer with a word or two or three. I like it. Let's do it. And, we put the extension on our building on the basis of go ahead. He had done his homework, and he knew that we had done our homework. So I'm happy that he doesn't have to sit at a desk. And in addition to the 125 people at DSR, he's got 2,000 people worldwide in Belgium, in Mexico, in China, and across the United States. He's got to take care of all those people, too. Somehow he does it.
A very intelligent guy, and I think there's very few battery chargers that he doesn't own.
Well, he sells over 90% of the automotive battery chargers in America.
Yeah, I'm sure of that.
They may be labeled Die Hard, they may be labeled Napa, but he made
makes
them.
Yep, that's true. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time, especially since you are now a member of the International NHRA Hall of Fame, that you honored me by coming, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. Great to see familiar faces. I was thrilled to drive up and see the parking lot full. After all the years you've been doing this, and we were just talking about it, you're going to be at 50 fairly soon with this show. No, that's cool. You should be proud of that. I'm glad that everybody's still here and everybody still supports. Thanks, Don.
And there's a boatload of people to watch us online, so.
Well, hello, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike Lewis, Senior Vice President of Don Schumacher Racing. Thanks for. My next guest will be on her way up here momentarily. Yes, ma'am, that's you. You ever wonder why or how these guys and gals drive Indy cars, what it feels like, what it's like? Well, there's a way you can find out, too, very easily. The Indy Racing Experience, they have two-seaters. You can go online, indyracingexperience.com, pick out a date that works for you, wherever it might be, and in the promo box put SJ1 and you get a 50% discount. It's a great ride. Hundreds and thousands of people have taken it, and I think they've only had one or two people go and push the red button to stop it that I'm aware of. It's a great way to find out what is IndyCar like. You can find out, and you run at 180, 190 miles an hour, so you get a pretty good idea how fast those poles go by in the speedway when you're running. Do you need something embroidered, stitch? Of course, Stitches 2 is the only place to go. They're located on Gasoline Alley. If you can throw it, ship it, drive it, kick it, however you can get it there, Fran can take care of you. Give her a call. Her number is 317-271-3444. And are you looking to take a tour and visit a shop? Well, you can do it in class and in style. Bill and Stephanie have a Grand King Race Shop limousine. They'll pick up 6 to 8 people wherever you are, take you on a tour, and deliver you where you started from. If you want to do it, give them a call. And office number is 317-820-3959. And they also are heavy into car restoration. If you want to buy one, they have several vintage cars available, or if you want to buy one and what are you going to do with it, they can do it for you. So get a hold of the Grand King people, call Bill. And they also have a Cracker Jack. If you got an offie engine you want rebuild, they got a guy there that can do that. Their number again is 317-820-3959. Now, are you a vintage buff? Well, you need to subscribe to SVRA's Speed Tour magazine. It's a class magazine, first class. In fact, they'll be here the first 2 or 3 days or 4 days in August. But go to svra.com and subscribe to the magazine. You will love it. And before they come here on July 24th or 25th to the 28th, they're going to be at the 2019 Portland Vintage Racing Festival at Portland International Raceway. If you're anywhere in the area or you can get there, go there. You'll love it. It's a great show, great cars, a lot of fun. And as I said, if you need a car rebuilt, you want to buy one that is already done, you want to get into vintage racing, do it. Call Bill, 317-820-3959. My next guest is a young lady that I met a long time ago. I don't know if I had hair then or not, but it's been quite a few years ago that I met her. She worked in motorsports for Team Green, for Andretti Green, and for Newman Haas. She took a sabbatical from the motorsports world and got a job out in Seattle with Nike. And for some unknown reason, after being in the Northwest, she's back in Indianapolis, back with IndyCar. She is the new vice president of marketing for the IndyCar series. And I invited her, and she foolishly said, sure, I'll be there. What time? Please welcome S.J. Luedtke.
Thank you, Don. It's good to be back.
What got you into marketing? Where did you go to school to start with?
Well, I found my way here through a couple detours. Grew up in Wisconsin, just outside of Road America. Found my way to the University of Wisconsin, where I thought I was going to be a doctor. Realized I didn't want to go to school for 7 more years, and found myself working at a little resort bar at Siebken's Resort. And their tavern, if you haven't been there,
I know where it is.
You know that place.
I've been there, yes.
Is a racing mecca of sorts. I like to refer to it as the tip-top bar, famous in Monaco, to open wheel racing here in America, and met some folks from Newman Haas. And they gave me a chance to come on the road with them. I thought, sounds great. I'll go travel for a couple years, see some sights. And maybe go back to being a teacher after that. And here I am 20-some years later, back in Indy, where I would very much agree with you. It's all about the people. It's what brought me back. My racing family has always been here and part of my life, and I'm really proud and glad to be back directly working here again.
Vice President of Marketing. What does that mean?
Well, that means my job is to find ways to keep all our great fans, like all of you here tonight and following along online, engaged with the sport. Sometimes you agree with what we're doing, sometimes you don't, but that's part of the way we go about things. And then also grow our fan base. So, again, I was nodding my head a lot while Mike was up here, face a lot of the same challenges. We have to build a new generation of fans. So I also second bringing out your sons, daughters, grandkids, friends and family out to races. It's something that we all need to do to keep our sports alive.
I sent a message to somebody, and I can't remember now who I did the other day. A friend of mine sent me a full-page ad from the Boston Times, or whatever it's called in Boston. There's a Formula E race there. And I said to this, whoever I sent it to, is IndyCar going to be there, have a presence? I mean, you have a bunch of people, and the cars look the same, although one's noisy and one's not. But are you going to be there? Because that's not that far away from Pocono, and Pocono needs all the help they can get. Is anybody going to be there? Nobody answered me, strangely enough, so I'll ask you.
Will anyone be at the Formula E race?
Yeah.
I think they have a little bit different model than most of us do. I'm still learning what their model is from the outside. I think they've said first and foremost they want to be a digitally led motorsport series. So they're very much about building content and having people through those phones we seem to be, and those younger kids are attached to even more so. Still learning from my 13-year-old godson teaching me how to use my phone. But, I think they're going about it a different way. Their model isn't strong on attendance figures. I was watching or heard a sponsor, maybe I got targeted with an ad where it's interesting, their lowest entry point is $12 for a ticket for the race out in Brooklyn, New York. So if you're looking for an economical entertainment, it sounds like that's the way that they're going. But to me, it seems like they're really much more about showcasing the technology of electrical engines, which is something we're facing in IndyCar, and a challenge as marketing dollars and spend shifts to things that move forward with environmental friendly vehicles and things. We're working with our engine suppliers to figure that out. So I think they've got a strong case there. They have 12 engine suppliers in their series because it's a place that they can showcase their technology, just like Chevy and Honda and our other partners in the past have used our series for. So they found a niche that's important to certain people. And then It's a model where I think that's a key focus for them, knowing where engine suppliers are, and then they're looking at that content. They, by comparison, as I came in, they have as many followers on social as IndyCar does currently, which blew my mind when I started doing my homework. But they've been very focused on growing their fan base through that, as opposed to thinking about a television package or something more traditional where we've been.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be, even if you only got 2,000 people, said, hey, it's only in Pocono. Let's take a ride down and see it. Make them aware.
You
you're
want to go with me?
No.
Okay.
I got to cut the grass. I got laundry to do. My honey is gone to the end of the month. But it just would seem to me that I also suggested, and I won't tell you what the answer was. I said, Pocono to me is struggling. I don't know what they do, but the people I know out there say we see nothing. No idea it's there. I said, why not put a couple of show cars in Union Station and one in Philadelphia, whatever it's called. Put a big screen TV up there and show the action and pass out the schedule. Oh, we couldn't do that. Why? Might cost too much. They got, 500,000 people go through a day. If you can't pick up 10,000 people, it makes no sense. But I guess I don't know. I don't understand why all effort isn't made to try and let people know they're there.
I think it's something we want to, as I come in, one of the opportunities we have is to work more closely with our promoters. So, we don't own outright the promotion of our races. It's a model where we have partners that own the tracks or own the races, and they take on technically that responsibility. I think as a series, I see it as an opportunity for us to work more closely with them. One of my goals coming in was to build those relationships and start to build those relationships with Rusty and Michael out at Pocono. I was just on a call with them earlier today, or with Kim Green and Kevin Savary, who happen to be some of my old employers. Yeah. They own a quarter of our races, and continuing to work with them to see how we as a series can give them the tools and support they need, and maybe nudge them a little bit. But mostly I think it's making sure that we arm them with things that help them promote the races and get people there. So it'll be a focus as I continue to kind of get my feet under me.
Now, there's one guy I don't think you need to worry about with much help. That's Chris Blair.
Oh, yes. We love Chris Blair. I have really enjoyed getting to know him.
He's got it figured out, and the owner says, let's do it, whatever it takes. And he spent a boatload of money fixing the place up, being able to get in and out of the track. He's got places for motorhomes and so forth. I mean, the guy gets it.
He totally gets it. I met him, I think the first race. So I started less than 2 weeks before the St. Pete race, and I got to meet him. I hadn't met him before, but I love his energy. I love his drive. They're willing to try anything, which I really love. I even love the old, a couple of weeks ago, they put out a promotion that if you had a side of a barn, that they'd give them, they'd paint an ad on it. And I mean, that just takes me back to my old growing up in rural Wisconsin and seeing ads on the side of barns, on my way to school. So, I really appreciate and support whatever we can do to help those guys.
And to me, it's not me because they don't want to hear from me, but he's a guy I'd get all promoters together and put him up. Here's what you need to do. Because there are promoters, as you are aware, we'll find out. They kind of, okay, they'll show up, let you do the work. I've suggested a number of times it costs X amount for us to come in. You do the promotion. If you don't, X amount of promotion. If you don't do that, you pay us and we'll do it.
Yeah. I think you should have Steven Starks, who does our promotional agreements, in here and help him with
Well, I've had Steven in here a couple times. He's a good guy.
He's a great guy. I love working with him.
Former professional basketball player in Europe. Super good guy.
He's great.
I've got a couple of questions for him, so there's a couple of things he's done, but I'll get to that later.
All right. I'll let him know you're coming for him.
Oh, he knows. When you were at Nike, you were in the football world, so you had uniforms like drivers had, you had helmets like drivers had. What part of that business were you? What did you do?
Sure. So my last job at Nike, I was with Nike for almost 9 years. And my last role, I was in charge of marketing for all of Nike football. there you have to reference it as American football because they've got that other thing we call soccer. But my job was to basically make high school kids want to buy Nike football cleats and products to play their high school football game. That was my number one goal, and the way we did that was leveraging our athletes like Odell Beckham Jr., Andrew Luck, local favorite here, was one of my Nike athletes, and finding ways to use them to influence kids to want to purchase our shoes.
And don't quote me on this, but I think Nike's been fairly successful. I mean, Mr. Jordan is living well because of Air Jordan shoes, I'm sure, over the years.
Yes.
What's your attraction to racing?
I think I wasn't a race fan growing up outside the track. My first job, a friend called me one day and said, "Hey, I'm working the corn stand on the top of the hill. Do you want to help me and make some extra money?" I'd never been to a race before that. But I think it's the people. I think the product on track is in sport. I've worked in a lot of sports. I've worked obviously in football. I worked with baseball in the MLB for a while. Some basketball, a lot of running and races, that marathons and those things. And all of those athletes are phenomenal. But when I think about, and it's a hard thing for people to relate to, right? A lot of you have thrown a baseball before or shot a basketball or played catch with someone in the yard. You can kind of relate to the feeling of what it's like to play that sport, maybe not on the same level. But in motorsports, it's pretty hard to relate strapping yourself basically into a rocket ship and going at ridiculous amounts of speed, either for really short stints at a very quick velocity in drag racing, or going around an oval pulling 5 Gs through the corners for 2.5, 3 hours. So I think, for me, that's always been exciting, and the fact that these athletes are willing to do that and take the risks is something that I just can't fathom, but I find so amazing, and I want people to understand how amazing it is. Put the entertainment side aside, but these athletes are phenomenal, and I think just the combination of man and machine is something that's unlike any other, and I really want to help try to promote that and get people interested in it.
When I first came around in the 60s, drivers didn't work out. Their workout was, if they had an argument, they'd go take care of it in the parking lot, and then they'd exercise their arm and shoulder down at White Way drinking beer together.
A lot of arm curls.
Oh yeah, it really worked out well too. Now some guys that I had seen there, I wondered how in the hell did they get in the car tomorrow, but they did somehow. But everything's changed. Jim Leo is a program where you can get in shape, and they work. And I don't know if you've been up to Jim's place, but you look up, he's got the records of all the various exercises, and you look at the top, and it's all Scott Dixon. He's the best at all of them. But that's where these guys go, and you talk to a driver that's not, you got 2 weeks off. What have you been doing? No, we're up working out every day.
I live around the corner from Connor Daly, and I was coming home last night, and there was him and Alex Rossi going out for a bike ride at 6 o'clock, and I'm sure it was their second workout of the day. They're so dedicated. It's amazing.
And it's amazing what, people ask me, oh, they're not athletes for Pete's sake. They sit and drive. Oh, really? Do you get tired driving your car? Imagine driving at 220 miles an hour for 2 or 3 hours, like you said. We got a couple of questions. I missed one. It's so tiny. How does one bring their kids to a race when they don't know it's happening? Now,
Good question.
Let me tell you something. Some years ago, I used to get tickets. They'd give me tickets. And I'd go to a restaurant, I'd go somewhere, and I'd say, "You're going to go to the race? What race?" "It's 2 miles from here." "What's going on?" "IndyCar." "Oh, well, I don't have a ticket." I said, "If I give you one, will you go?" "Yeah." So I give them a ticket. Next time we go back, were you there? And sometimes I knew the number. I'd go see if they were sitting in the seat.
That's great.
And then after 2 or 3 years of that, I'd pass them out. And I went in and I said, "Well, can I get some tickets this year?" And they said, "No." I said, "Why?" "Promoters, they don't want to give away tickets." For Pete's sake, there's empty seats. What the hell difference does it make? Get people in. Is there any kind of program, would seem to me logical, I think, but that's, my logic isn't always good, to give one of the team members, not the owner, the team member, tickets to pass out to the crews, because they're the ones that are out with the common folks. The owner's up in the top suite with some, whatever they do, and give tickets to people that aren't there, because even at Indianapolis there's empty seats.
Yeah, I think that's one of our focuses, or my focuses coming in is how do we partner with the promoters who technically own those tickets to find ways to hopefully help everyone get on the bandwagon, that if we just get people in the gate, 8 times out of 10, we're going to make them a fan, right? There's always going to be the one or two who are like, oh man, this just isn't for me. But I've rarely in all my years, when I've had sponsors, guests coming in for the first time, or personal friends that I've taken or introduced to the sport, very rarely do you get someone who says, just not for me. So I think it's an opportunity. I think, finding ways like, a couple of the tracks has put in free Fridays, especially if for kids with a paid adult. Some of them are completely free. I think those are case studies that we can learn from and help showcase to other promoters as things to try. Hopefully you make enough money on concessions and other things that it feels like a worthwhile endeavor for you. So those are things I want to explore and understand where there might be barricades or apprehension to do those types of things. I think one of the other things we've talked about is how do we incentivize or enable fans like yourselves to bring people in, right? To your point, if I got an extra ticket, I'm going to give it to someone new and introduce them to the sport. So those are things the team and I have started to talk about. We haven't landed on what the, great solution or the silver bullet is yet, but I think we're going to look to try some things and learn from them. It's a big thing I learned at my last job at Nike is trial and error. You're never going to always win on every chance you take, but if you don't take any chances, you're never going to make the shot, right? And someone famous who played basketball said that. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take,
Yeah, that's
something
right,
to that effect.
Yeah.
So, hey, you know what? I don't have all the solutions or ideas. The team down on West 16th Street doesn't have all the ideas, so we welcome thoughts, ideas that you all have, and can't promise we'll try them all or can try them all, but we're always willing and able and ready to listen.
Well, it just seems to me when you got and granted, the attendance is growing. I had Brian Barnhart here when he was race director and so forth, and he said, we get 30,000 people, you get 10% increase. That's only 3,000. You don't even notice that, but it's an increase. Yes. And still, so many tracks have empty seats. Now, Iowa probably won't this year because they're back running at night, and they used to pack the place at night standing remotely. Now
I'm excited for that race.
That's a good race. Very interesting.
I haven't been before, so I'm taking any ideas of what I need to do.
And the other one that I hope will join very quickly, there's two of them that should be in. One of them is Richmond. That was a great race.
I enjoyed going to the mini oval.
I would wander around and say, have you ever been here? No, we come to NASCAR. What do you think? God, these cars are fast, aren't they, though? And they don't bang into each other. They do have an accident, but it's not like these guys banging it because they got fenders. These cars don't have fenders. I'm hoping that'll go, and at some point they got to get Kentucky back. They got to get Kentucky back.
Kentucky was a great track too. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear they're interested, and I hear Richmond is, so maybe
we'll see what Steven's got in the mix. I'll ask him tomorrow.
Oh boy, I'll call and say, hey, guess what? I got a couple of questions that are going in with a young lady to ask, so you answer her. You don't necessarily have to answer me. Is the series happy with the NBC Gold and the NBC SN and NBC? Are they happy with what they're doing?
We are. It's we're up in looking to be up in significant digits this year. The addition of some additional races on NBC as a major network will be great for us. I was really excited with the results from Road America a couple weeks ago, where we had an average of over 1 million folks watching the race, which was the first time outside of an Indy 500 we'd had that in a long time. The NBC Gold coverage, I was catching the brunt of that. I will let them know. I think it was an unknown product for a lot of our fans coming in. And while we had been sharing all of our practices and qualifying on IndyCar.com and streaming them free of charge, it certainly did not have the kind of production, of what the product is now. So I'm hoping for those of you that did invest in the product, you're happy with it. I see a lot of hand claps and nods. We've worked really hard on that, and I think we're all really pleased with the results so far. Obviously, we'd always love more eyeballs on everything we're doing, but in conversations with NBC, they were blown away with the Indy 500. They've been to every major sporting event. We had Jenny Storms, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for NBC Sports, as well as John Miller, who's the head of all of NBC Sports in town, along with many of their other key team members. And I think they were very much blown away with the experience and all the pageantry that comes with the Indy 500. So I think you're going to see them invest in that even more. And the biggest thing we've talked about coming out of it is it's funny you mentioned people don't know the race is going on. There are so many people who don't know we race anywhere else, right? They think the Indy 500 is the only race we have, and that's a challenge I have to lead the charge on overcoming. But an example is us working with my counterparts over at IMS and making sure that we have visual cues that there's a race the next week up the road in Detroit, or a couple weeks later or months later over in St. Louis. If you walk around IMS, it's a real opportunity for us not only to help people find their way and know what's going on the week or the month of May, but also that there's things happening and ways to be involved with the sport after the month of May is over. So it's something we'll work on next year.
One thing that's impressed me is NBC has promoted IndyCar. I see crawls once in a while. They'll take a commercial break and they say this weekend is blah, blah, where it is and so forth. I got in a conversation with one of the producers for ABC. I said, why don't you promote the events? You're not happy with the crowd of viewers. Why don't you promote it? Well, we promote what we know people will watch. I said, well, that's really brilliant. If you don't tell people you're there, how the hell are they going to watch the race? And let me give you a little secret in case nobody told you. If the viewers and ratings go up, so does your rate card. The two go
That's right.
hand in hand. Never gotten where she thought I was nuts, but I thought, well, I guess they pay you a lot of money
Don,
to
I
tell
might
me
have
I'm
to bring
stupid.
you on staff down there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Although he gives me all this advice for free already, so I'm not sure that's a smart
I'm
move.
not giving you any of it. It's just things that occurred to me, that have happened. And I think what you've done prior to coming here will work well. Now, I've heard in the last week or 10 days there's been some major changes that some of them have surprised the heck out of me, to be truthful. Who is in the command of that division that's made all these changes? I mean, some people that I've known for 25 years, I thought have done phenomenal, are no longer part of the team. What happened? Why?
So one of the directives I was given as I took this role, as well as a consultant that came on board who's been in motorsports for just as long as I was as well, was to assess the existing organization and share a point of view of what the organization needed to look like for IndyCar to move into a new phase of growth. So a gentleman named Mike Zizzo, who hails back from the kart days and also worked at NASCAR and led the helm of PR at Texas Motor Speedway for the last 13 years. We were charged by leadership down at 16th in Georgetown to assess the situation and come back with a point of view. We felt that we needed to reorg and realign the marketing communications team to be more integrated, which means that we needed to work much closely together to make sure that we were building our fan base and getting awareness for the series out there. With that move, we needed to create new roles that were more digitally led, that were more visual in delivering content for the new generation of fans as well as the existing generation of fans. So with that comes the needs for different skill sets. And what we did, and it also, in an integrated role, starts to condense roles and responsibilities. So some roles were eliminated given kind of that integrated approach. So some roles were eliminated. In the roles that are in the new reorg, we look to put as many folks that were existing on the team in those roles. Those folks continue to be part of the new integrated team. I actually brought along Kate Davis, who's our new director of communications, with me today. She is a 17-year motorsports veteran and comes with a great resume to help us take the organization into the future. So that was the purpose and reason. Everyone who is on the team are great people with great skill sets. It's a matter of making sure that we set the IndyCar series and business up for what the future needs to be and finding the right folks to fill those roles.
Well, I want you to know, with all your digital and fancy stuff, and you can sit in a grandstand and you can watch timing and scoring and all that, I can't. I can't see doodly squat.
You and my dad have the same phone. I like that.
So, unfortunately for me, I can't, get a beer and set it down beside me and watch what's going on. I'd have to get dizzy watching the cars go by because I don't get it here. And it surprises me, and I don't know how many races you've been to, 5 or 6 by now, or 9, I guess, whatever it is. How many people have in their hand, and even when they're walking from the grandstand to get a beer or to the John or something, they're watching this stupid thing. I've watched people walk into poles and signs downtown with their phone, so I got better sense than that. I have this, so it doesn't do me any good. But putting that stuff available where you can reach in your hand now is critical, it seems to me. Critical.
It is. I think, and right now as we, continue, it's an interesting transition, right? You've got to serve your existing fans through the mediums that they're used to consuming the sport and engaging with the sport, while also looking at this new generation and understanding them and where and how you think they're going to get engaged with the sport. So it's this really interesting transition time for us as we think about it, where we want to make sure that we don't alienate any of our existing fans who are connected to us through certain mediums and channels, but also start to build out those kind of newer areas to bring new folks in.
Well, I hope they don't just run the race and say, well, you can watch it on and don't open the gates. So you can watch it home.
I don't think that'll ever happen.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd ask. Something that I have preached to drivers, and there's one guy in particular that has done it, branding yourself, so that when people hear the name, they know immediately who it is. And the number one guy at that is the mayor of Hinchtown, Gene Hinch. You mentioned Hinch or the mayor of Hinchtown, everybody knows.
Absolutely.
The other one who hasn't changed anything over the years is A.J. Foyt, but everybody knows what that is. He's branded himself years ago.
And he sticks true to his brand, which I love.
Oh, yeah. Do you suggest that or work with any of the teams to try and get drivers? Here's what you have to do.
We do. It's, again, another place where I think bringing some of my experience in will hopefully help with that. And I actually was on a conversation earlier today with Harding Steinbrenner. And I was just thinking about this earlier. When you said your 15 years would go by really quickly, I was thinking back that when I left motorsports, Colton Herta, the first time Colton was 3. So I feel really old, and his dad was one of my drivers, which was even more scary. But we were talking about Colton, because it's interesting because these kids are very much focused on making sure that they want to be, I'm a focused race car driver, right? So when they start to build their brand, which these days is very much led through social media, they think their approach right now for many of them is to show them in their driver suits and or in their helmets and or in their car at the racetrack, and very little outside of that. And what I've started to talk to Colton's team, to some of the Andretti folks, to anyone who wants to have the conversation. Simon, I've been working with Kristen and his a team on kind of his approach, but people want to be able to relate to you. And again, going back to, it's hard to relate to strapping yourself into a rocket ship and flying around a racetrack. But if you showcase that for Colton, he's in a band. He started his own punk rock band. He is a SoCal surfer skater dude, and that's part of his brand. But if you go into his social media channel, the only thing you see is Colton Herta, the race car driver. So how is some surfer skater dude who can relate to him through that maybe going to come around and be like, oh, and this guy's a race car driver too? So if you look at folks like I worked with, like Russell Wilson, OBJ, Antonio Brown, they showcase themselves being a dad, playing with their kids in the backyard, hanging out with their wife, or going for a sail on a sailboat. So you start to understand that underneath the helmet and the uniform and the superstar status, they're a little bit like you and me. So now I can start to relate to them, which hopefully turns into cheering for them. So it's something we're working on in trying to support the teams and help kind of educate the drivers on that.
I'll tell you, one of the guys that I think needs to be out more, and I'm working on getting him again. He's been here 2 or 3 times. Is George Michael. Super.
He's
young.
amazing.
He's
I spent a ton of
super
time with him at Road America. He and I actually went out and visited some campers who might have been flying some. I mean, we've gone through multiple iterations of series sponsors and logos, so we identified some that had some old Verizon IndyCar, or we found a couple kart and champ cars, and we brought them some new flags to help support the series. And it was a great chance to interact with fans. It was funny because he handed them off, but he didn't really introduce himself. And so I was like, by the way, this is courtesy of Harding Steinbrenner Racing and IndyCar. And then they'd look at him and they'd go, oh my God, you're George Michael. And they just had a hoot. The first place we stopped, the next thing out of their mouth was, would you guys like a drink? And it was about 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. We're like, maybe we'll be back later. But he's amazing. He's so good for our sport, and so willing to do whatever it takes. And I'm just really glad he's here.
I've had him here, I think, 2 or 3 times, and people love him. When are you going to get him back? Whenever he's in town. If he's nothing going on for a week or 2, he goes chases some outfit. What's it, Yankees, I think?
Is that what? Yeah, some ball team in
I
New
bet
York.
he was in London with him, but I don't know that. But there's, there are some interesting people, and I think that's a key to getting people out so that the fans recognize this is so-and-so. I think 2 guys in my mind quickly that have really come around completely was Scott Dixon. When he first got here, if he got a yes or a no, you did real well.
Do you want to hear an interesting story? I know we're running late on time.
No, that's all right.
Hopefully he won't care if I tell you this.
That's all right.
So Scott and I became friends my first year in the sport, and he won his first race in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and at that time became the youngest winning IndyCar driver.
I was there.
It was the year it snowed. We had to run late, and his crew chief now, Blair Julian, and I have been very close since we both started in 1997 in hospitality. Other side note, I started out making Michael Andretti's porridge. That's how I tell people I started entering. I literally cooked his porridge every morning.
Porridge?
Porridge. He ate porridge. But Blair came over, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and there's a little pub in Broad Ripple called Connor's that we like to go hang out at. And we had been going there for a while, and Blair said to me, Esther, you got to call the Connors guys because we want to open up. They weren't open on Sundays back then, and this was Sunday. He's like, you got to get them to open the bar up so we can celebrate Scott's win. I was like, okay. So I called the guys that owned it, and I said, hey, we want to bring everybody over when we get back to town to celebrate Scott's win. They're like, okay, no problem, SJ. So we all show up there super late. This is when they used to replay the races on ABC at the night of the race. So we had the race on in the background, lots of celebratory arm curls. And then we all piped down at the end when, I don't know who was calling the races back then, but they were like, and Scott Dixon becomes the youngest winning driver at age 19 or 20, whatever he was. And JY, who was running the bar, still does, looks at me across the bar and Blair and says, "Are you kidding me?" And because he'd been having drinks with us there all season, and I just looked at him and said, "Well, you didn't card him." So we took Scott out and then got him busted for celebrating underage.
Well, for him to at that time had tipped a few, he was known to do that early on.
He was. Now he's every once in a while he likes to have a couple, but he's
I'm sure
he's
he
pretty
does.
dedicated.
He
So
better
and
be
he's a
dedicated.
dad now too.
Yeah, and
so.
Emma will take care of that.
Yes.
And the other guy that people I think are now starting to recognize who and what he is Alexander Rossi. When he first came, he was very quiet, and I had him here, and he, yes and no was good. You have to ask a question whether you can't answer that. But now that he's a winner, he's a champion, he's going to win the title, I think, this year. He's starting to come out, and people are realizing he's got a sense of humor. He's a good guy. He really is.
He's a great guy. And you know what? I love his snarl. Everyone says he needs to smile, and I'm like, no, it's his thing. And the thing is, he's such an approachable, likable. I'm gonna call him a kid because I'm much older than these guys these days. But
what the hell do I call you then?
you can call me kid too. It's fine. No, he's great. Hey, and you know what? We have a crop of drivers who are so amazing, so personable, so willing to help. They're like, SJ, just point us in a direction, tell us what to do. We all want this thing to succeed, and I couldn't ask for better partners in a group of individuals than that.
That's probably like in the NBA and NFL.
Oh, yeah.
So they just ask them, and they're sure.
Yeah, I'll come back and tell you some stories from that time at another show.
Can kids listen?
Yeah, I'll keep it PG.
Okay. Well, I think, although I don't know the reason some of these people let go, some of them I've known for 20, 25 years and thought they did a hell of a job. Now you're changing and there's new direction and maybe they didn't adapt. I don't know. And I'm sorry to see them go, but I hope that, the direction you're taking the series and the people upstairs, and I think in my mind, the best thing that's ever happened to IndyCar is Jay Fry. I believe that he really understands. He knows what he's doing. He knows where he's going. He makes a 5-year plan, and he sticks with it. You know what's going to happen. So I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah, he's great. I've really enjoyed getting to know Jay and work with him. And, one of his other directives for us was, we've got a 5-year plan for competition. Now it's your and Mike Zizzo's job and the team's job to build a 5-year plan for marketing communications and how we're going to grow this thing. So that's next on the table for us, and I totally agree with you. Jay's been amazing for the series.
Coming from where he was as a team owner and listening to when they had a complaint, people didn't listen. Now he listens. If you want to talk to him, he'll listen to you. And silly as it is, I'll send him an email or text. He'll answer me. That's how desperate he is.
It's a change of culture, right? Not thinking we have all the answers or can figure everything out on our own. So he's very much about listening and collaborating to find a way forward, and that's what we're going to be doing as well.
Well, I have a guest I'm going to try and get on here, and he's one of them because I want to know. There won't be a halo on these cars. Oh, really? What the hell is that thing they're putting on? It's a halo.
It's an aero screen.
Yeah, that's what he calls it. Because it's got a little screen in front. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And you did say you would come back at some point and tell us some of the stories of the NFL and the NBA.
You can hold me to that.
I will. Thanks for being here. The new Vice President of Marketing for the IndyCar Series, S.J. Luedtke. Thanks for being here. Thanks. Are you going to be over there for a minute or two? Okay. We will be here next week. First, I want to remind you, if you haven't been to the Indiana Motor Speedway Museum, you've got to go. The Mario Andretti display is fantastic. And when you walk in the door, there's a desk, and on the left-hand side is a very smiley, blonde young lady who's sitting right there. She won't give you any crap. Anything you need to know, she'll tell you. So be sure and go over there, take a look at it. It's really worth your time. And if you have a bike, not a pedal bike, a motorcycle, Wednesday night is bike night at McGilvery's. Tomorrow night's Wednesday. Come on out. If you don't have one, come on, look at the ones that are here. Last week it was a little slow because there was rain in the east and the south, and that's where most of these guys were originally coming from. So if you're anywhere around and say, let's go have a beer and see what the motorcycle look, come on into McGilvery's, they got it. This is Don Kay saying thanks for being here, thanks for watching. Till next week, good night.